You see the supercars on Orchard Road, the watches at Marina Bay Sands, the penthouses overlooking the straits, and you think you understand what you are looking at. You do not. Every luxury object visible in this city is the surface of a calculation, a carefully managed decision about what to show, what to hide, and what the showing will cost. In this video, I am going to show you why owning luxury in Singapore is one of the most dangerous financial and social games in the world, and why the people playing it are far more trapped than they appear. Please subscribe and activate the button to help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can bring you more relevant content and so YouTube can notify you when we publish new videos. Most people look at luxury in Singapore and see success. The supercar parked outside a restaurant in the CBD, the limited edition watch on the wrist of someone in a boardroom, the penthouse address that appears very occasionally in the right kind of conversation. They see a rival. What they are actually looking at is a performance under enormous pressure, a carefully calibrated, continuously managed, financially punishing display that the person maintaining it did not fully understand when they began and cannot easily stop now that they are inside it. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because the display is not optional, not at the level where serious wealth in Singapore operates. The luxury object is not decoration, it is not indulgence. It is infrastructure, the specific, load-bearing, socially essential infrastructure of a position in a network where what you own communicates what you are worth, and what you are worth determines what you are allowed to access. Remove the display, and you do not simply save money, you send a signal, a specific, immediately legible, permanently filed signal that something in your position has changed. And in Singapore's elite circles, a signal that something has changed is a signal that invites reassessment. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you saw someone in a position of significant social or professional standing visibly downgrade? Not lose everything dramatically. Simply downgrade a smaller car, a less prestigious address, a watch that communicated a lower level than the previous one. How did the people around them respond? Not with sympathy. With recalibration. That recalibration is the mechanism that makes luxury in Singapore dangerous. Not the purchase, not the financial cost of the object, though that cost is genuinely significant and genuinely punishing in ways that most people outside the system do not fully appreciate. The danger is the exit. Once you are inside the display, once the network has calibrated its assessment of your position to include the signals your luxury sends, stepping back from those signals is not a neutral financial decision. It is a communication. And the communication is read with an accuracy and a permanence that has nothing to do with the actual state of your finances. But here is what nobody tells you before you enter the game. The entry is never announced as permanent. It never presents itself as a commitment you cannot reverse. Every luxury purchase, in the moment of purchase, feels like a choice, a specific, reversible, freely made decision to acquire something you want. It is only later, after the network has incorporated the signal, after the relationships have calibrated to the level the signal communicated, after the access and the introductions and the specific quality of professional engagement that flows from being legible at the right altitude has become part of how your world functions, that the reversibility disappears. Not all at once, gradually, in the specific, unannounced way that all permanent commitments are made in Singapore's elite world. Through the accumulation of small decisions that individually seem reversible and together become a position that cannot be abandoned without consequences the person was never fully informed of when they made the first decision. And this is where it gets genuinely dangerous. Because the financial cost of maintaining that position in Singapore is not static. It does not remain at the level established by the initial acquisition. It compounds. It escalates. It responds to every upward movement in the network by creating new minimum thresholds of display that the position now requires. The person who bought the right watch to communicate a specific level of arrival discovers, 2 years later, that the watch communicates a level that is no longer the level they occupy in the network, and that maintaining their current position requires an object that communicates the current level. The game moves, the cost moves with it, and the player who entered believing they were making a one-time investment in a signal is now managing a portfolio of signals that requires continuous attention, continuous investment, and continuous calibration to an environment that is always slightly ahead of where they currently are. What comes next is the financial architecture of that portfolio. And the financial architecture is considerably more punishing than any price tag on any luxury object in any store in this city has ever suggested. Singapore has the most expensive car market in the world, not by a small margin, by a factor that, when explained to people who have never encountered it, consistently produces a response of disbelief. A Toyota Camry in Singapore costs more than a Porsche 911 in Germany, not because the Toyota is better. Because of the Certificate of Entitlement, the COE, a government-issued permit required to own a vehicle in Singapore, priced by auction, and currently trading at numbers that add between 80,000 and 200,000 Singapore dollars to the cost of any vehicle before a single component of the car's actual price is considered. The COE exists for a specific and legitimate reason. Singapore is a small island with a road network that cannot accommodate unlimited vehicle growth. The government manages vehicle numbers through a quota system, and the COE is the market mechanism through which those quotas are allocated. That explanation is accurate. It is also completely irrelevant to what the COE actually produces in Singapore's luxury culture. What it produces is a system in which the ownership of a car, any car, is an immediate and unambiguous declaration of significant financial commitment, and the ownership of a luxury car is a declaration of financial commitment so large that it functions, in Singapore's social calculus, as one of the most powerful status signals available to anyone operating in this environment. But here is what most people who purchase that signal do not fully calculate at the point of purchase. The COE expires. After 10 years, the permit lapses. The owner must either renew, at the current market rate, which has no relationship to the rate paid at original purchase, or scrap the vehicle, and the renewal cost in the current market frequently exceeds the market value of the vehicle being renewed. In other words, the signal that was purchased 10 years ago must be repurchased at current market rates simply to maintain the position that the original purchase established. And this is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. Because the person who purchased the luxury vehicle 10 years ago did not purchase a signal for 10 years. They purchased entry into a category of social positioning that now requires continuous reinvestment to maintain. The signal is never owned. It is leased, at increasing rates, in a market controlled by a government that is not primarily optimizing for the convenience of wealthy individuals who have built their social positioning around vehicle ownership. Ask yourself this: how many of the luxury decisions you currently maintain were made with a clear understanding of the total cost of maintaining them over time? Not the purchase cost, the maintenance cost, the renewal cost, the escalation cost as the network's minimum thresholds move upward, and the signal that communicated the right level 3 years ago now communicates a level that is one tier below where you actually are. Most people did not calculate that cost, because the system did not present it clearly at the moment of entry. But here is the part that extends beyond vehicles into the entire architecture of luxury ownership in Singapore. The property market operates on a similar logic, with different mechanics and equally significant implications for anyone who has built their social positioning around a specific address. Singapore's additional buyer's stamp duty, ABSD, adds between 20 and 60% of a property's value to the cost of acquisition for buyers who are not purchasing their first residential property or who are foreign nationals. The rates vary by category and have been adjusted multiple times in recent years as the government has sought to manage property market temperature. The result is a property market where the luxury address that communicates the right signal also carries an acquisition cost that has, in many cases, no relationship to the investment merit of the property at the price paid. And this is where it gets most dangerous for the people inside the game. Because the luxury property in Singapore is not primarily an investment, it is a signal, and signals, unlike investments, do not generate returns that compound over time to offset the cost of holding them. They generate access, they generate relationships, they generate the specific quality of social positioning that the network values. All of which is real, all of which is genuinely valuable, and none of which appears on any financial statement in a form that a banker or an accountant or a financial advisor could point to and say, "This justified the cost." The financial case for luxury ownership in Singapore is not financial, it is social, And social returns are the most difficult category of return to liquidate when the cost of generating them becomes unsustainable. What comes next is what happens when the cost becomes unsustainable. And it happens more often than anyone in Singapore's elite circles will publicly acknowledge. The moment the luxury position becomes unsustainable is not dramatic. That is the first thing to understand about how this game ends for the people who can no longer play it at the level it requires. There is no public announcement, no visible collapse, no moment of recognizable failure that the network responds to with the specific, unambiguous social recalibration that would at least have the clarity of a defined event. There is only the quiet, gradual, deeply uncomfortable process of managing a position that the financial reality can no longer fully support, while maintaining, for as long as possible, the appearance that nothing has changed. And this is where it gets genuinely dangerous. Because the management of that appearance is not free. It requires resources. Specifically, it requires the diversion of resources from the financial repair of the underlying problem toward the social maintenance of the surface that conceals it. The person whose position is under financial pressure in Singapore does not reduce the signal. Reducing the signal would accelerate the very recalibration they are trying to prevent. They maintain the signal at increasing proportional cost relative to their actual financial capacity, while managing the underlying problem through channels that generate no social visibility. Private credit facilities. Quiet asset liquidations structured through entities that do not connect to their name. Conversations with advisors conducted with a specific, careful calibration of what can be said and what must remain implied. The full range of financial management tools available to people with enough sophistication and enough relationships to access them. All of this is real. All of it happens, more frequently than anyone in the game will acknowledge, because acknowledging it would itself constitute the signal that the management is trying to prevent. And here is the shock that most people are not prepared for. The system that created the problem is the same system that the person must rely on to manage it. The network whose expectations created the unsustainable cost is the same network whose relationships provide the access to the private credit, the quiet liquidity, the discrete solutions that make the management possible. Exiting the network to escape the cost is not available as an option to someone who needs the network's resources to manage the cost. The trap closes most completely at exactly the moment of maximum financial pressure. Ask yourself this. Have you ever been in a situation where the thing creating the problem was also the thing you needed to solve the problem? Where the cost and the solution were provided by the same source, on terms that the source controlled? That is the architecture of Singapore's luxury trap at its most complete. But here is what most analysis of this situation never reaches. The people managing this situation are not, in most cases, in genuine financial crisis. They are in a specific, Singapore-specific form of financial discomfort, a condition in which their actual financial position and the position they are projecting to the network are in a gap that is manageable in the short term, costly in the medium term, and potentially structural in the long term. And the gap is growing. Not because their financial position is deteriorating catastrophically, because the network's minimum thresholds for the signals required to maintain their level of access are escalating, as they always escalate in a market where the display of wealth is itself a competitive activity among people with significant resources. The signal arms race is real, and it is accelerating. The person who purchased the right signal 3 years ago is now looking at what the right signal costs today and doing a calculation that does not resolve comfortably. And here is the most uncomfortable part of that calculation. The person who steps back from the race does not simply save money. They lose position. The person who maintains the race does not simply spend money. They lose ground to everyone who is accelerating faster. There is no stable equilibrium. There is only the continuous choice between escalation and contraction. And both options have costs that the network does not advertise when it extends the original invitation to play. What comes next is the dimension of this game that most people who enter it never see, until they are already inside it. The psychological cost of playing a game where the rules change continuously, and the exit is never as available as it appeared at the entrance. Everything we have covered, the financial architecture, the signal arms race, the trap that closes at the moment of maximum pressure, is the visible surface of the game. But there is a dimension operating beneath it that explains why intelligent, sophisticated, financially capable people keep playing a game they know is dangerous. And what comes next is the part that changes how you see everything else. Here is the reversal that most people who study Singapore's luxury culture never state clearly enough to be useful. The game is not played primarily for the things the game produces. Not the car, not the watch, not the address. Those are the visible outputs of the game, and they are real. The car drives, the watch keeps time, the address provides shelter and a view and the specific quality of physical comfort that significant money can purchase. But the game is not about the objects. The game is about belonging. And belonging, the specific, psychologically primal, evolutionarily ancient need to be inside rather than outside, to be recognized as a legitimate member of a group whose membership matters, is a need that does not respond to rational analysis about the cost of the signals that produce it. It responds to the signals, or their absence. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because the person playing Singapore's luxury game is not, at the deepest level of their motivation, making a financial calculation. They are managing an existential one. Every luxury object maintained is a confirmation, repeated, visible, externally validated, that the belonging is still real, that the position is still intact, that the recalibration has not happened. Every luxury object abandoned is a confrontation with the possibility that the belonging was always contingent, that the position was always dependent on the signals that communicated it, that without the signals, the belonging itself is in question. Ask yourself honestly, how much of what you own, in any environment, is owned because you want the thing itself? And how much is owned because the thing confirms something about who you are in relation to the people around you? Most people, asked that question in the abstract, claim the former. Most people, observed in their actual behavior, reveal the latter. Singapore simply makes this dynamic visible at a resolution that most environments do not, because in Singapore, the cost of the confirming signals is so precisely quantified. The COE price is public. The property values are tracked. The membership fees are known to everyone who matters. That the financial dimension of the belonging purchase is impossible to ignore. And here's the shock that reframes everything. The financial cost of the luxury game in Singapore is not the primary cost. The financial cost is actually the affordable part. The primary cost is the cognitive and emotional cost of continuously managing the gap between the life you are performing and the life you are living, between the signal you are sending and the reality the signal is supposed to represent, between the position the network believes you occupy and the position you actually occupy at any given moment. Managing that gap requires a specific quality of ongoing attention that consumes resources, cognitive, emotional, relational, that are not visible on any financial statement but that are, for the people managing them, genuinely exhausting in ways that the financial cost alone would never produce. But here is what nobody tells you about that exhaustion. It is not a side effect of playing the game. It is a feature of it. Because the exhaustion, the specific, continuous, never fully resolved tension of managing the gap, is itself a social signal. It communicates seriousness, investment, the specific quality of someone who cares enough about their position to pay the cost of maintaining it under pressure. In Singapore's elite culture, visible ease is earned, not performed, earned, through years of demonstrated ability to maintain the signals under conditions that would have produced visible strain in someone less adapted to the environment. The person who maintains the luxury position without visible stress is communicating something to the network that the person who shows the strain cannot communicate. They are communicating mastery. And mastery, in Singapore's elite circles, is the signal above all signals, the thing that makes every other signal more legible, more credible, and more effective at producing the access and the relationship and the opportunity that the game is ultimately played for. This is why the game does not stop, even when the financial cost becomes genuinely punishing. Because the alternative, stepping back, reducing the signals, accepting the recalibration that follows, is not experienced as a financial relief. It is experienced as a loss of mastery. And for people whose entire professional and social identity has been built around the demonstration of mastery in this specific environment, the loss of mastery is not a financial event. It is an existential one. What comes next is the only honest answer to the question of what this game is actually worth playing for. There is a conversation that happens in Singapore, not often, not publicly, and almost never between people who have not first established a level of trust that took years to build about what the game actually cost. Not the financial cost, the other cost. The specific accounting of what was traded away over the years of playing the game at the level the game required in exchange for the position the game produced. The relationships that were not pursued because they were not legible at the right level. The risks that were not taken because the network's assessment of the failure would have been permanent. The genuine preferences in how to spend time, in what to pursue, in who to spend it with, that were edited out gradually and without any single definitive moment of decision, because they did not fit inside the display that the position required. Most people who have played the game at a serious level for a serious period of time have some version of this accounting. They do not always share it. Sharing it would itself be a signal, a communication about the gap between the performance and the reality that the operating system does not permit. But in the specific, trusted, genuinely private context where the accounting is shared, what emerges is remarkably consistent. The game produced real things. The position is real, the access is real, the specific quality of professional and social engagement that the signals enable is real and genuinely valuable in ways that are difficult to replicate through any other mechanism available in this environment. And the game also cost real things. Time that was not optional. Relationships that were managed rather than inhabited. A quality of daily experience. The specific texture of a life lived mostly in performance mode, calibrated to an audience that is never fully absent, that is different in kind from the quality of experience that the position appears, from the outside, to produce. Both of those things are true, simultaneously, without resolution. And here is what that means practically for anyone who is currently inside the game, or considering entering it, or trying to understand how to navigate it differently from how most people navigate it. The game has an entry cost, a maintenance cost, and an exit cost. Most people calculate the entry cost. Almost nobody fully calculates the maintenance cost, and almost nobody accurately estimates the exit cost until they are in a position where they are contemplating it. The entry cost is the initial acquisition, the first luxury signal purchased at the level the position requires. The maintenance cost is the continuous investment required to keep the signal current, to renew the permits, to maintain the address, to ensure that the network's calibration of your position does not drift downward simply because the signals that established it were not renewed. The exit cost is the recalibration, the specific, permanent adjustment in how the network assesses your position that follows any visible reduction in the signals. And here is the honest assessment of what that recalibration actually costs in practice. Less than you have been told. Not nothing, the recalibration is real, and the access that the recalibrated position provides is genuinely different from the access the previous position provided. But the access that is lost in a managed, deliberate, clearly communicated reduction in signal complexity is not the access that matters most to the things that actually matter most. The relationships that survive a visible reduction in luxury signals are the relationships that were based on genuine mutual value rather than on the specific social positioning that the signals communicated. The access that survives is the access that was earned through demonstrated competence and genuine reliability rather than through the maintenance of a display. And the relationships and the access that do not survive, the ones that dissolve when the signal changes, are, with very few exceptions, exactly the relationships and the access that were costing the most to maintain and producing the least in terms of anything the person genuinely valued. The game is dangerous. That is not an exaggeration and not a rhetorical device. The financial architecture is genuinely punishing. The social mechanics are genuinely constraining. The psychological cost of continuous performance at the level Singapore's luxury culture requires is genuinely significant in ways that the visible success the performance produces consistently conceals. But the game is also not inescapable, and the exit is not as expensive as the people who profit from your continued participation will suggest. The most dangerous thing about the game is not the cost of playing it. It is the belief that stopping is more expensive than continuing. That belief is the game's most effective mechanism. And now you know it exists. Luxury power exists for one reason only: to reveal what the elite pay to hide. Subscribe to Luxury Power and hit the bell now. Every week a new secret is uncovered. Drop in the comments where you're watching from. We love knowing our global audience. Everything you saw here is based on real cases, verified contracts, and documented facts. We don't glorify wealth, we dissect it. Do you still think money buys freedom? Tell us in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to see the truth. And remember, even the most expensive life can be a gilded cage. See you in the next video.